Beautiful. And we're live. All right. So, anyone who's been playing along at home, welcome back to the Talking Average Fitness podcast. As always, my name is Sam, and I'm one of the two guys you see here most regularly. My compatriot in all of these occasions is my good, very tall friend, Kevin. Kevin, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing phenomenal, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. There's a little bit of grass peeking through underneath the snow up here in Maine. So,
Here we go.
yeah. So
Here we
now
go.
instead of thinking about moving snow, I get to cast my brain forward and thinking about like seeding the lawn and all the other work that's going to
I
have
was
to
gonna say
happen.
the mushiness that will be your lawn afterwards.
Yeah.
Not to make you jealous, but it's gonna be 60 degrees here in Massachusetts for the next 3 days. So boom.
What's my
Yeah, I
daytime
went
high
surfing
today?
yesterday morning at sunrise, and it was a beautiful sunrise over the ocean in California here. So
Jesus.
I'm not trying to make you guys jealous, but the water was close to 60. I mean, it was rough.
Wow. What's it like to be athletic enough to surf? Because I would just be snack like shark snack at that point. I would fall off my board, lose my board, drown
Well,
probably.
it's one of the most fascinating sport quote unquotes or physical activities, because like take any activity that's like surfing, like skateboarding or snowboarding or like all these other things, you get like ample amount of time to practice when you're learning. Like those are all really difficult. If you talk to an adult who tries to skateboard or who tries to snowboard, it's like you spend 5 days on your butt, you know.
Yep.
And but the volume of time you're actually skateboarding or snowboarding is astronomical compared to surfing. Like surfing, you paddle out for a 3-hour session when you're learning and you catch a wave if you're lucky. That single wave is a 5-second interval that you get to attempt to surf. So it's like the rate of improvement is just stupid slow. So it's like it's of all the sports out there, I think it's one of the most difficult to see progress on, because you get so little time actually doing it. Most of the time is bobbing around in the water and learning the ocean. So it's a fascinating beast in and of itself.
Say I would make it to the point. It would take me however long to figure out how to actually catch the wave at the right point. And then once I'm there, I'm like, oh, I got it. I'm doing it. The process of bringing my one, like going to stand up, would then immediately capsize me. It's like, all right, I caught the wave. The next 7 years is spent trying to get the first foot on the board. Next 7 years getting the second foot on the board, and now we're cooking with gas. But I would be probably 65 at that point. So again, that lines up right with my trajectory for the Masters 65 plus at the games. So
perfect.
I love it. Well, and if you haven't sussed out, we have a guest. Our first repeat guest. So that's very
cool. I'm honored.
Hey, we're honored to have you. So Mr. Pat Barber, CrossFit Seminar staff, CrossFit Games. God, what the heck else, dude? Like, a little bit of everything.
Many children.
Father of many boys.
Run multiple businesses within the organization of CrossFit. Worked for equipment companies. Done all kinds of fun stuff. So
yeah,
pretty much done everything there.
Yeah, and very, and just that little bit talking about the time rate of improvement inside of surfing relative to the amount of time you spend actually attempting to surf should give you an idea of why we wanted to have Pat back on here. He's got a hell of a brain attached to his head. And there was a comment bandied about the last time we had him on, where Pat's assertion was, I'd like to dismantle aesthetics. I'd like to essentially just demolish it as a training methodology.
Well, I think not so much. It was like as the goal, right? Like you wanted to dismantle aesthetics as the like goal of training,
right?
Yeah,
and not necessarily dismantle. It's just a thing that's been going around in my head that I have yet to. I wanted to unpack it with you guys, because I think again, you guys both have some good minds on you, but I think aesthetics as a pursuit is 99% of why people get into fitness, like even more so, and even people who are in it for other things are also wrapped around the aesthetics that they get from it. So I was wondering, I've never seen the solo pursuit of aesthetics be long-term beneficial to an individual. There has to be a shift at some point to pursuing something else, because the nature of my experience, the human organism is that we get to a place that we thought we'd be cool at, and we're like, you know what, I want more. It's very rarely do we get there and we're like, you know what, I'm satisfied. And I think that the underlying mechanism of human and the pursuit of aesthetics, when you take it further and further,
Yeah.
it's really, you can do aesthetics really poorly, and whereas it's much harder to do performance and physiological capacity poorly. I mean, it's possible, but it's compared to aesthetics. I mean, you don't eat and you dehydrate yourself, and you're like, cool, good job, way to be disciplined. And it's like, anyway, so that's the thing I want to unpack, because it's hard for me in my head to not be really jaded on the entire industry, when that's even the like good people, even the people who I know are in it for the right reasons of like helping people, pursue this mechanism of weight loss and looking sexy and all these other things. So I don't know. It's something that I'd like to unpack. So I'm not full vendetta against it. It's just something that I wrestle with deeply.
Gotcha. Well, since you the way you phrase it when you first started chatting about it, when you said I can't see aesthetics as like a long-term pursuit paying off for people, at some point there needs to be a shift. As soon as you said that, because I was ready to like, I'm gonna be devil's advocate when he says aesthetics is stupid, I'm gonna be like, but like there's the beach though. As soon as you said like as a long-term pursuit, like you can't see it paying off, I was like, shit, like he's got a really good point. Like no like no one's like, here's the deal, I'm just gonna be a massive bodybuilder, or like, I'm not trained to look a certain way when I'm 80 type thing. Like that, when you put it as a long-term pursuit, I was like, that qualifier, just like all my arguments just out the window. Cause I can't argue with that statement. I can't argue with that statement because like, even if you get into fitness as a, teens or 20 something year old, and you're like, the only thing I want is to be shredded. That's all I care about in life. And you pursue that. Okay, great. Whatever results you get, let's say you achieve that. You're like, I look like a Greek god from age 20 to age 50. At some point, there's going to have to be a shift in how you train and why you train, to something that, aside from just that, even if you still want to look good as a 60, 70, 80-year-old, that can't be, at least, again, I agree with you, it can't be the primary focus of what you're doing and why. As you continue through this path of life, because at some point it's just not going to be, especially if you're pursuing it from like a competitive angle, like you said, where the dieting is really restrictive, you're playing around with hydration levels and salt levels and things like that to really try and get super lean. That's not sustainable. Even like if you look at from like a year-round perspective, like bodybuilding and physique competitors get down to that level of stage lean for less than 24 hours. They literally peak it down to the point of like, hey, I'm at that level of dehydrated and lean for maybe a handful of hours, which is essentially during the show if you're timing it right. And then immediately after, there has to be a bit of a rebound back. Like you can't stay at 2% body fat, no fluids for at all. You just can't do it. So
like you're gonna put a number there, and you're like, not.
I was gonna be like, you can't do that for like a week. Well, of course you can't. You fucking die, you idiot.
Yeah.
Like it. So, I can't argue with your statement. Like as a longevity thing, you can't. So, there was my argument.
Let's unpack then the value of it and where it goes, because I think that mechanistically we look at things all the time. It's what we see is how we kind of perceive the world and build context around it. And where I'm running into most of my psychological issues with the industry at the moment is that it's very confusing. Like for somebody who like wants to work out or wants to get healthy, like the pursuit of bodybuilding is simply form. There's no function associated with it at all. I mean, they're the only person who maybe dives into that, or not only, but one of the few is like someone like Marcus Philly, where he's like functional bodybuilding. But by definition, bodybuilding is not about what you can do. It's about what you look like. And that's so, I mean, that's so literally surface level. like it's literally the surface of what's going on that I think people getting into it confuse what's important about training with that. I don't see it as a poor initial motivator. But
Mhm.
I'm wondering if we could shift the narrative in the industry to being like, you want to look good, feel a way, like here's a way to perform well, and let the form follow. Let the what
Mhm.
you look like follow that, because it's just, it's so much more meaningful. It carries with it so much more weight in the long term of it. Like when you
Mhm.
start feeling good, like that's a big difference. I think when you look good, it's a big difference too, and people talk about that a lot. But I don't know. I don't have a clear, succinct point on this. It's something I wanted to try to
Yeah.
unpack with you guys, because I've brought it up at multiple seminars and been like, just for my, like during lunchtime with a
Mhm.
group of 30 people, where I'm like, help me with this.
Mhm.
And people in there who are bodybuilders and who have done things, and they'll talk about the value that they have. Certain points in their life, they're trying to lean out and look a certain way and blah blah blah. And then but I think that they're, to me, they're the rare one, the one who understands that all they're doing here is pursuing a little bit of weight loss,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then they're going to go back into living a normal good life. Whereas I think most people, they don't have that, they don't know exactly what they're doing because there's just too much information out there. They're like, I'm going to pursue starvation, and
Mhm.
I don't understand why it doesn't keep working.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a whole kind of like a little sidebar as well, the nutrition piece of it, because it's one thing to train for aesthetics and be like, I'm doing different isolation things. And I liked your point about Marcus Philly, where, I think Marcus is a super smart dude, but it also, like, functional bodybuilding, he's basically like, it's the pursuit of bodybuilding. He's just choosing to use movements that tend to be a little bit more bang for your buck. Like,
Yeah,
he's using more compound stuff. He introduces the Olympic lifts because, like, hey, we can look good but still do some cool stuff. But it's like, it's the pursuit of looking good but using the stuff that can help, so
totally. And he's
um
capitalizing on that. I mean, the
yeah.
guy's making bank off of a program that, like, because people want to look good. And I think that
Mhm.
that's to me is a bit of a hybrid of, like, kind of selling your soul, because
Mhm.
you're tricking people into doing it rather than just getting them to be more functional.
Mm,
But at the same time, it's not, because people want that. They want that.
yeah.
So you're not tricking them. That's exactly what they're looking for, and you're
Yeah.
helping them be more fit. So it's, I don't know. I wrestle with it.
the,
I
the way
couldn't
I
do
would the way I would phrase that is, like, I've heard this at level one seminars all over the place, and all my friends that are seminar side people is, you're giving people disguising what they need as what they want. So you're giving people what they need, but disguising it as what they want
Yeah.
tends to be a pretty effective way to kind of get that across. So,
Yeah.
um, we know what works, and we know it's going to give you fitness and health and longevity along the way. But at some point, you kind of got to give people a bone sometimes and give them what they want, or at least make them think it's what they want, type thing. Um, Sam has talked before about, like, he loves to manipulate his members by different ways of saying things and doing things to get them to do stuff.
No, that's not
So,
what I said. I said I lie to them. And
okay, well, that's still manipulating a little bit. That's like, you're getting
it's,
them to do something by how.
well, if we're going to do a 1K row and then 30 thrusters at a certain weight, I'll lie to them and say, don't worry about the thrusters. This is all about the row. Try to PR your 1K and then just like see what happens.
Yeah.
So this, I, I'm loving this back and forth. And I think I'm just writing notes that I can just throw at you guys as we're kind of digging through this. So I think something to be acknowledged is I think the idea that, yes, if at least for everybody or a lot of people, probably statistically a majority, aesthetics or the look of fit is one of the drivers, the primary initial drivers for both bodybuilding and CrossFit, right? Like nobody comes in being like, not nobody, probably a lot of people don't come in being like, I want to increase my work capacity, you
No.
know? Um, because if you know that word, you know that behind that word is a shit ton of burpees, and nobody comes in saying they want to do more burpees.
Right.
And so the first question is, and I think you both kind of answered it, like, is it the thing, or is it being dangled like a red herring to lure them in so that they can do something else and they get kind of handed something on the back end?
Sure.
And I think, I mean, even Austin Maliolo's one of his favorite lines at seminars is, why do people do CrossFit? And they throw out a bunch of different reasons, and he's like, no, everyone wants to look good naked, and
Right.
it's sure, okay, great.
That was Glassman's line, but yes.
Was it? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
But
So I mean, that's
definitely
really
used it.
well, yeah. I mean, if it works,
Oh, it
um,
broke down. Yep.
exactly. And so the thing that I'm bopping around is, and I've been wondering this myself. So we, the three of us, have a very specific experience with the CrossFit methodology in terms of how it was presented to us. And we talked about this previously, right? The game of telephone that was people's experience of CrossFit from its original core kernel outward radiating and all of the little biases and changes that happen along with that.
Mhm.
And so in terms of providing them a benefit or an end result, I guess one of the questions I have is keeping in mind things like the dangers of over-volumizing and the blunted intensity that happens when you are doing like a strength and a metcon style programming and something like that. How much harder is it for someone to quote unquote get CrossFit as we are imagining it, I think, when we talk about it, versus someone just walking into a gym and getting bodybuilding as whatever it ends up being? Like, I was trying to describe this to a friend of mine last night. Like, if I was going to go pick a CrossFit affiliate to be at because of my experiences, I have a very specific experience that I would want to have as an athlete in a gym. And because of that, that limits my options severely
Yeah.
because of the way the of the models that are popular right now in a gym. And so, like, how hard is it for someone to get the CrossFit that we're talking about and thus get the benefits that we're talking about?
Yeah. I would say that the hard thing is when you say bodybuilding, you're already speaking to the outcome, right? So what's the goal of
Okay.
body? We know that, right? What is the
Right.
goal of bodybuilding? It's to build your body. It's to
Sure.
look a certain way. So there are many ways you can pursue that. And it's kind of for the bodybuilding space and the stuff they have out there. There's a lot of variance within that people are going to get from bodybuilding. But the
Sure.
focus is generally eat less calories than you burn
Mm-hmm.
and do isolation based exercises to focus on muscle growth in areas that you're small or whatever it is. And when you say CrossFit,
Mm-hmm.
there's a far more nebulous understanding of what that is because
Yeah.
when you say CrossFit, you're speaking to a specific program. So I would say it'd be more like saying how if I walked into a regular gym, how
Mm-hmm.
likely am I to get Marcus Philly's program? Because that's a style of bodybuilding that's specific to Marcus Philly. Whereas CrossFit is
Interesting.
a style of training that's specific to achieving fitness. If because the outcome for CrossFit is not CrossFit. We're not doing CrossFit for CrossFit's sake. We're doing CrossFit to achieve an end state. So the program that we use achieves fitness. So I think
Yeah.
a more easy comparison would be say, hey, if I want to go into a gym and get a fitness program
Mm-hmm.
versus I want to go into a gym and get a bodybuilding program, if you walked in and said both those things, you'd be as likely to achieve a similar style, like something that's closer to those things, right? So, like if I walked in into even like across a gym that you guys and I don't agree with, and like
Sure.
in terms of their programming, and said I want a fitness program, they're going to
Right.
be giving you a program that's geared towards making you more fit as per our definition.
Sure.
So because we're speaking to the end stage of what it's looking for. So I think it's kind of like that. If you were to walk into any CrossFit gym and say, I want a fitness program, you'd be as likely to get a fitness program as walking into any Globo gym and saying, I want a bodybuilding program. But to get CrossFit as we see it, you'd have to walk into a gym that understands the methodology that says we believe in single workout a day, blah, 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 blah. The same way you'd have to walk into a Globo gym that says we preach bodybuilding this way and this because we think it's the best, you know?
Okay. Yes. So it'd be and kind of all of that kind of hinges upon the definition for the word fitness or the definition for the word bodybuilding.
Correct. Yes.
Which is, and it's certainly in our circles, something that, when I heard you talking about that we've kind of departed from this understanding that we don't do CrossFit for CrossFit's sake. We do CrossFit because we had a like a very carefully and specifically defined or very specific definition for fitness, and that was always the intended outcome.
Totally.
So, and in terms of changing the dialogue, which I agree needs to happen when I think about, I have my own personal opinion about the benefits of either of these programs, and I'm trying to remain unbiased as much as possible as the moderator. I guess for the bodybuilding crowd amongst us, I saw something on the internet recently. It was like, why does The Rock keep lifting and presumably using steroids the way that he does 30 years in? And he's the biggest that he's ever been. And he's not getting weaker, right? Like, why does he keep doing that? And the response from this person online was because he has to. Like he's got an entire thing that he has built that hinges upon him looking like that.
Yeah.
So when we talk about building the body, right, for my bodybuilder man, think a couple years down the road for me, right? If we're going to build the body, great. To Pat's point earlier, humans don't like to just stop and then be complacent and be happy with things. What happens, and how do we shift the discussion in the bodybuilding world to something that is, more than temporary, it feels like? Because your goal could be, even if you spend 5 years on a goal across the time span that is your life, that's a very small window of time. So how do we shift that discussion?
I think it's being honest with what it is, because I think that's where the confusion comes in. People look at a bodybuilder and they say that person's a fitness expert. That's bullshit. They're not a fitness expert. They're a bodybuilder. So understanding the separation and definition between what they're going for. And I think professional bodybuilders aren't pretending that they're fitness people. Like they're not being like, I can go out and win a race. Like I can go out and be fit. They're literally pursuing aesthetics. And if you understand the language, then you see the difference easily. Like I think, and since we're professionals in the space, that's easy to see. Like, and the confusing thing is there are people who are, they ride that line where like you'll see like a beefy ass bodybuilder who can do this amazing physical feat in a very specific domain of like, I can curl 200 pounds. And you're like, holy crap, that guy can curl 200 pounds. They must be fit. And it's like, you don't have a definition for fitness, and he can curl 200 pounds because he's pursuing aesthetics. And right now he's so massive that curl is appropriate for his thing. It's not, and it's still not in the pursuit of curling heavier loads. It's in the pursuit of looking a certain way. I just think that the definitions need to be separated. Like I was just in class the other day. I'm taking an EMT course right now. And one of these people was like, oh, you're a bodybuilder, right, Pat? And I'm like, no, I do CrossFit. And they're like, what is the difference? And I was like,
yeah.
Like it's not even comparable. It'd be like being like, hey, you play soccer, Pat? And I'm like, no, I surf. And they're like, well, what's the difference between surfing and soccer? And you're like, what do you mean? What's the difference between surfing and soccer? They're like, wholly different beasts. Like they don't even exist in the same field, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
But I think that's a really, really good way to describe it. Someone watching from the outside, they're both physical activities. It's about the same thing, right? You know?
and they
Yeah.
look relatively similar. You know, you look at a professional CrossFitter and you're like, that person kind of looks like a bodybuilder. And you're like, that person is very, very different than a bodybuilder.
Yeah. And I think some of the kind of confusion is probably in today's day and age of social media and internet things. You go on Instagram and there's no shortage of fitness influencers
Mm-hmm.
that are like, they have fitness on the end of their handle. They're like, all we do is talk about fitness, but then they're like, let me just do 5,000 clamshells and eat a leaf. And this is
Yeah.
what fitness is. And
Do a
it's
bunch of
like,
hip thrusts.
a lot of those people, like, some of them are just kind of like, they were just born that way. They were going to look like a human weapon, regardless of what they did. If they went and played ping pong, they were going to be the most human weapon looking ping pong player in the world.
Yeah.
Because they just look that way. And it doesn't really matter what they do. Like there are some, this is one of the things with nutrition wise is you sometimes will watch, it could be a professional CrossFit athlete, could be a bodybuilder, a fitness influencer, or whatever, someone in the fitness space.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at their Instagram, you look at their Facebook, their YouTube, their whatever, and all it is like, man, this dude just eats pizza and donuts and like cookies and stuff, and he's still just shredded. It's like, number one, drugs, they help. Two, maybe that person was just, for whatever reason, because they're 19 years old, they were just going to be shredded regardless.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what they do, how they train, how they eat, they're just going to look that way. But they've taken that, this is the way that I look, and they're using it to try and make money, and they're selling stuff to people and like, do my ab program, 28-day fitness fix, and bootylicious program, whatever. They're using the way that they look, maybe naturally or unnaturally, to sell those programs. And for someone who doesn't have the education to understand the difference between, this is what bodybuilding is, this is what endurance training is, this is what CrossFit is, this is what functional fitness is, and how CrossFit and functional fitness might be different.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't know the difference between the things, they just see a fitness influencer and they're like, check, that's what fitness is. So I'll just go follow this person. And so it's, you're getting, it's, misinformation that from multiple different sources. And it's sometimes for people that aren't a part of the fitness space, or they don't have the education to kind of like tease those little things out and make those distinctions. They don't know.
Yeah.
And they're not going to know until someone educates them on what the difference is and why we do what we do versus what a bodybuilder does. It's just, to them, they're just working out.
So whose responsibility is it then to educate the world, right? Because like, I think it's ours. I think
I would agree.
We're in the space, but there needs to be a succinct message. I think a lot of times, even talking amongst us three, we could complain about the programming we find at a lot of different CrossFit affiliates because they're not true to a single workout a day and blah, blah, blah. That's still infinitely better, in my opinion, than going and just hitting a set of curls in the gym and getting a nice pump on. Like, and I honestly find it more confusing when I see coaches finish stuff off with like, we're going to do a set of skull crushers. And I'm like, okay, but you need to build some serious context for why they're doing this. Or here's my favorite one. They'll finish a class off and we're going to do flutter kicks and crunches as an ab finisher. And I'm like, the fuck are you doing? Yes, sure. But you better build context as to why. Like, you better be putting them through that and saying, hey, this is not so we get stronger abs. This is because it's fun to do. This is because I want to make you guys do this stuff. And very vocally being like, hey, if you want abs, it has nothing to do with this. And this is just fun and silly. And how you get abs is overhead squats and deadlifts. Like, it has to come with that language. Otherwise, your message is just like you're just shooting yourself in the foot because they're like, that's how we get abs and we don't do it enough,
Yeah.
Silly.
The way I like to think about it. So one of our I had a conversation with one of our morning members at one point. He was like, we don't do enough core. And I sat there and I was like, I'm like, we just did heavy sets of 5 overhead squats yesterday. I'm not sure what you think we're doing, but like what he meant was what most people think when they're like core. He's like, we don't do enough sit-ups. Like, I don't feel my abs being sore, so we must not be working my abs. Because again, another issue comes down to education is like, I must get sore to make progress. Like some people just put that connection. So like if they do a workout and their legs are wrecked, they were like, must have been a great workout. I got really fit because my legs are trashed. It's like, well, now you can't really work out with sufficient intensity for the next 3 days. You can't walk properly. So I don't know if that was super productive, but as long as you feel good about it, great. But it, it's the same thing. A lot of people with my abs weren't sore, so we must not do enough core. Like we need to do more core stuff. The way I tend to think about whenever we come out with like, we have like a little core cash out or an after bash or something like that in class. One, it's like, hey, it's to have fun. Most of the time, I've put this on Instagram a few times, but I like to call it like community bodybuilding. What I'll do is have people grab a partner, team of 3, and you're doing some sort of bodybuilding stuff. You do bicep curls, tricep stuff. Sure. And I'm like, one, you're gonna get a sick pump. It's gonna be great. Number 2, it's gonna help with like joint health. If all we're doing is a whole bunch of kipping pull-ups, like you need to have some supportive musculature, like doing bicep curls, tricep extension, things like that might be more bodybuilding, can help with like joint and tissue health. Sure. Number 3, I'm putting you in a team of 3, and you're gonna pick people that either you don't know or you don't know very well, and you're gonna learn something about them. You're gonna make a new friend today. Yeah. And so kind of frame it to them that way as like kind of a fun way to close out class, like how you were saying. It's not like, hey guys,
that's context.
Right here.
Like,
yeah,
no, 100%. So much context around it. Like that makes sense. And it like you accessorize an already pre-existing great program with some decent accessories. You don't create a program based off of accessories in order to get a sick pump on. And you're like, you have the program,
like it's like the sick pump is just the cherry on top. It's like it accomplishes all these other things. The fact that you have to now walk out the door facing sideways because you got 2 massives, like that's just bonus points for that one. But it takes a very skilled linguist and someone who understands what they're doing. I think there's plenty of coaches who literally just do it because, like you said, the clients want it, so they just throw it in there, and they themselves don't understand where it sits in the larger context of what's going on, and just makes it the message. Or worse, they just throw it in there because they don't know how to fill 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I knew that one would get Sam. I was like,
that's real.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we're doing France Day. I'm not quite sure how to fill the extra 10 minutes or 15 minutes in class. Let's just do 100 bicep curls at the end, and just because why not?
Why not?
It's like not that doing bicep curls after Fran is a wrong thing to do, but it's the why behind it, right? Yeah. And so that right there is like, if you're doing it, it's like, hey, it'll be a nice like community builder, build supporting tissue, like have a bit of some fun after a workout that tends to make people pretty nervous and really worked up beforehand. Just a little bit of some fun to kind of cool down, chill out after that. Like, okay, cool. Like it serves a purpose. But if you're just chucking it in there just to chuck it in there because you're like, don't know what else to do, so we're just gonna chuck this in there, also a problem.
Yeah. So talking about language, right? And I saw a video recently. Do either of you watch the Huberman Lab podcast? Occasionally, sometimes.
I watch a bunch of clips that pop up on YouTube from it.
Yeah. So he has a bunch of guests on, and one of the guests he had on recently was Dr. Andy Galpin out of the University of California at Fullerton, who's a PhD kinesiologist, and he was talking about the 10 attributes of fitness, and I'm like, okay, this should be good, and I went into it with a how far away from or close is it to the 10 general physical skills, and there's a lot of overlap. There are some things that I think are duplicates in his list that have to do with like cardiovascular respiratory endurance and stuff like that. And some things that he ignores entirely, like cognitive effects, cognition or things like flexibility.
He didn't have that?
About. No, not at all.
Interesting.
But one of the things that he did mention was like as an attribute of fitness was muscle hypertrophy. And I thought to myself, I had to pause the video, and I'm like, is that a thing? Like, is that a measurable, or is that a correlate in the same way that like when you get fitter, your blood pressure and your resting heart rate go down, right? Am I actually seeking those things, or am I seeking greater work capacity and I get them as a benefit? And in terms of language that can be used, I'll speak only for myself here, but I don't have the letters PhD after my name. And so when I see someone with a PhD on a platform like that, and this is not to disparage any particular platform, but just simply to highlight the difficulty in changing the discussion, talking about how muscle hypertrophy is a cornerstone of fitness and should be pursued as an end state. You know, it's like one of the things that you measure. I was like, how much harder does that make even having the discussion that we're having right now with people who are not already indoctrinated?
Well, I'm trying to think of how he would have been. So what was the name of the list? What did he call the list? It was a list of what?
It was like the 10
Like the 10 attributes of fitness.
Yeah, let me go find it really quick.
So what is, like, by definition, what's an attribute? So an attribute is regarded something being caused by. So basically it's something that you get from fitness. So it's the same thing. It's so when you do fitness, you get this, right? So, I mean, even mechanistically there, you don't, when you do fitness, I guess you get, but hypertrophy then gives you something, like you're looking to achieve an outcome from hypertrophy.
Yeah.
Right?
If you're gaining hypertrophy, then not always, but likely you're gaining some form of muscular strength.
Right. But you use hypertrophy to get muscular strength. So like the outcome is muscular strength.
I would argue vice versa. Like you use muscular strength, like in the goal of getting stronger, your muscles get bigger just as a byproduct of you getting stronger.
For sure. For sure. Yes. But isn't hypertrophy an act though? Or is hypertrophy just considered when the muscles get bigger?
I mean, hypertrophy would be when your muscles get bigger.
It would
just the enlargement?
Yeah, my understanding is it is literally the increase in surface area.
Yeah, surface area
of the muscle tissue.
Members of your muscle tissue.
Excessive development of an organ.
Well, I mean that's hypertrophy
basic,
yeah,
just as a general whatever. But as it refers to muscular, it's like Sam's exactly right. Muscular hypertrophy is defined as an increase in the cross sectional area of the muscle tissue.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
It's literally just muscle tissue going from this big to this big would be like muscular hypertrophy. And that's generally a byproduct of the tissue being put under enough strain to being forced to kind of adapt to that load or that mechanical tension.
So he was saying that was one of the attributes that you need to have from training versus.
So I've got the list here now.
Yeah.
So exercise can create physiological. This is notes from Dr. Andy Galpin, how to assess and improve all aspects of your fitness. Exercise can create physiological adaptations that can be bucketed into 9 areas.
That's what that list is, by the way. Like the 10 general physical skills is literally a list of physiological adaptations. Yes. And we didn't create that, right? That list.
No, that's from Dynamax.
Yeah, there's the Dynamax boys.
Yeah. Yeah. So he lists skill or technique, right? Which is a weird grouping of a whole bunch of things that I think could be broken out separate.
Coordination, accuracy, agility, balance, all tossed into one.
Yeah,
all of
basically.
That.
Yep.
Speed, power, strength, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So
muscle.
He's separating out muscle hypertrophy and strength.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the speed, power, strength, muscle hypertrophy, muscle endurance, anaerobic capacity, maximal aerobic capacity, and long duration training.
Well, wouldn't maximal aerobic capacity and long duration training kind of be like one achieves the other? You have to train long distances to increase your aerobic capacity.
Actually, he breaks it in the example he gives. He would say that something like a 2K row from an aerobic standpoint is a different measurable than something like a marathon time.
Or like a 2K ruck,
or that.
Yeah. No, so you're right.
So I think it's interesting. So but right there, muscle hypertrophy, right?
What, and did he get the context around muscle hypertrophy? Because then it size for size's sake. What the hell is he talking about?
Well, I mean, we could watch the video.
I mean, I think that's think that I think that's exactly what he's getting at. If he's like one of the components of fitness that you're training for and trying to increase his muscle hypertrophy, that like for in his list, he's like, this is an important thing to try and train and focus on is muscle hypertrophy and is a measurable of how fit you are.
Yeah.
At least the way I'm understanding it from what Sam is saying, that's how he's approaching it. Is muscle hypertrophy is something separate from strength, which I get because you can try and train to get, well, here's the thing. It's like you can try and train to get bigger without like when you're like, if you're like, I don't give a shit how much I bench press. I'm just trying to get a bigger chest. So I'm going to bench press, but I don't care how strong I get. I'm just going to bench press for the sake of getting bigger. Like you can try and do that. And for a very short window, your muscles will get bigger, maybe not noticeably to someone else. Like if Sam was like, I'm just going to bench just to get bigger, you know, or force it to 10 all day, try and get bigger, but I don't care how strong I get. At some point, you're going to have to add weight on the bar because I don't know about you guys. I've never known anyone that looks muscular that benches like 135 as their work. Like at some point, same thing as if you want to look bigger, you're going to have to gain weight. Like there's no dude on the planet that weighs 115 pounds that looks jacked because you just don't weigh enough. You don't have enough weight on your frame to achieve that.
Right.
So it's like strength and hypertrophy kind of have to go hand in hand. Even if your whole goal is I want to get bigger, at some point you're going to have to also get stronger to continue to move that needle, and vice versa. If you're like, I just want to be as strong as humanly fucking possible, at some point you are like, you can train strength without putting on size to a certain point, but at some point you are going to have to get bigger in order to get stronger. There's a reason why all the world record lifts for strongmen and powerlifters are not held by like the 62 kilo weight class. They're held by the 105 plus weight class where you can be 300 pounds and just be absolutely massive. Because at some point, if you want maximal strength, you're going to have to be maximally big.
Well, maximally strength relative to everybody, not relative to yourself. And I think that's where so like you look at the 69 kilo class weightlifters and they're stronger than all of the biggest people I know. And you're like, they're not
100%.
big. But so so I would say that, you know, for the individual, you don't necessarily need to get that much bigger to be strong relative to yourself. But if you truly want to move the needle in terms of other people's strength, you're going to have to be equal to their size. So if I'm going to go compete against a 225 pound man in just strength and we're both doing the same training, I'm going to somehow have to become eventually 225 because mass moves mass, baby. You know, like,
yes.
But that was a distinction I didn't make. That's you're exactly right, Pat. Like you don't have to continually get bigger just to get stronger. Like you can get stronger relative to you and your capacities. All good to go. But like if you wanted to really,
it's pretty wild to see how strong some smaller frames can get. Like and yes, it does max out, but it only maxes out on the top end. Like it only maxes out on like the when you're at the CrossFit Games and you see Josh Bridges trying to deadlift 455 and he can't pull it off the ground because he weighs $110, and it's like he's next to Rich who can just move it. But like I don't know. So I think hypertrophy is not. It's a weird one for me because I think it does not fit on this list. I think it doesn't.
Well, it gets weirder actually. So I like this website, Podcast Notes, because someone has gone through and like bulleted all of the things that were said, right? Okay. So he's got this big list, key takeaways, and then they start to dig in, how to achieve. They talk about the adaptations itself. So like, skill and technique, learning to move more efficiently, right? That I think we would all agree is kind of good definition for technique. Skill development examples, it says running more efficiently, shooting a ball, accuracy, swinging a golf club, coordination, things like that. Muscle hypertrophy, how big is your muscle?
Yeah, it's so dumb. Like, I think it almost feels like they're playing into that. It almost to me feels like he would add this to a list to be like, to play to aesthetics, to tell people that like, this is what, my program does this. And this, I think it's a good part of it, so people will pay attention. Because imagine if he said, you don't need to be you don't need this.
Yeah.
Like, I could see a bunch of gym bros being like, well, I don't like Galpin's program, you know? Well,
Well, and
I'm confused. What would just muscle size matter?
so I don't know, and I can't. And even later in the page, there's a section where they talk about how to assess, like tests, right?
Yeah.
So if we go down,
Is this
there's
like the tape measure around the bicep type deal?
well, so here's a movement skill test. Here's a speed or power test. Here is vertical jump. This one single broad jump.
Broad jump.
Strength test, hand grip dynamometer, which, like, as far as strength tests go, I mean, I think he's talking about contractile potential.
Yeah, being able to
in this
like hold it.
particular
Yeah.
case.
Yeah, they definitely are with it, and just grip strength. Yeah.
Yep.
That,
Dead hang, leg extension. So, but hypertrophy, any sort of body composition test can do this. DEXA scan, gold standard. Pay attention to fat-free mass index and use an online calculator to calculate your FFMI. So it's not. It's
not talking about
it's
size.
not.
It's just talking about muscle mass relative to body weight.
Well, and
but
more
even-
importantly, it's not a test in the sense that everything else is a measure of, I don't know, it's like you've got to actually do something, whereas this
Yeah.
one is like, I don't know, how thin are you, or how cut are you?
Well, because the thing is, it says your fat-free mass index should be at least 20 for men and 18 for women, assuming you are reasonably lean. So it's like, okay, so we're already making assumptions here. You're not giving like a hard kind of process for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it says it's going to tell you if you have sufficient muscle mass, but sufficient muscle mass for what? All you need to know is your body weight, your body fat percentage, then your height. Enter those numbers, you get your FFMI score. So it's like
so maybe it is literally just speaking to a minimum measure of health, right? So like when you're talking about needing some muscle, a lot of people are super weak and they need to put on muscle mass. They need hypertrophy in order to be there. I think maybe we're looking at it from the lens of we're CrossFitters. Everybody who comes to CrossFit has enough muscle.
But
like, so continued hypertrophy is unnecessary. But if you look at the masses, they're so they have no muscle. They need muscle. So maybe that's the hypertrophy they're referencing.
But that's the thing, though, is that, and this is what kind of drives me nuts about this is, so in kind of going back to the original point, we're highlighting this is a doctor, PhD kinesiologist at a major university on a major podcast platform talking about the importance of hypertrophy. And even then, like, let's assume you have a severely deconditioned athlete. They come into your affiliate or to your gym. This is a person for whom they need to do resistance training. Mm-hmm. But the desired outcome that we are coming at, of course, for us is not, I want them to have greater muscle mass. I want them to be stronger and more capable. Right.
Right.
But if they were like, oh, I listened to Dr. Andy Galpin on the Huberman Lab podcast, and he says bigger muscles are better for fitness. And so, like, son of a bitch, man, like, this is already hard, and now it's just made harder.
Yeah.
But I think a skilled person could just be like, a coach could just be like, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
And we will get you those bigger muscles via this mechanism, via being better at everything. I think that'd be a really easy transition. But I think too much of the industry plays into like, well, then let's do some hip thrusts. And you're like, what the hell? Hey, who's jamming the music? Is that you, Kev?
Yeah, that's we got the noon class going on right now. So they're doing a little mashup of Helen and Fran. So it's dirty.
That looks
hilarious.
Yeah.
It does sound dirty. Well, I mean, we've been running around in circles as we are wont to do. That's okay. For about 48 minutes now. I think that we've, and so like I love that you brought up Marcus as an example of this, because this is a guy who, this
is a guy who genetically was always super lean, like the entire time, and then created a program to sell his sexiness. Like, I love Marcus. Like, he's the one who knocked me out of the games one of my final years competing individually. Like, so he beat me by 1 rep, literally 1 rep, and took my spot to the games. So he and I had this battle all weekend. So I've known Marcus forever. I put him through his level 1 and his level 2, and like I should have made it didn't do his level 2, but he currently is the guy I use as the example for the fastest time at the CrossFit level 1 workout. He was the guy who did he did a 246 on that thruster burpee one, like right in front of me, and I was like, that was awesome. So I still use him to this day. And I love him, and he definitely what did he do? He got into OPEX for a while and got really cerebral with it, and like, oh, this is where you do this, and you got to make sure these are unbroken sets, and we're not doing Fran, we're doing squat thrusts, you know, like, and
rest time and tempo.
Yeah. It was like, yes, and not to say that there's not value in those things. It's just
sure. Yes.
But then he came up with his functional bodybuilding stuff, and it like, knowing his history, I'm just like, come on, man.
Yeah.
like you're doing a great thing and you're sneaking it in there, but people see that and they're like, that's how he did it. And you're like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he was really, really, really genetically gifted. And then he was like, you go back and look at photos of him when he was at the games, he is huge.
Yeah.
It's like especially when you contrast him now versus him then, is literally slabs of beef for pecs. And and now he's really lean. He does a great job of, staying I don't mean this to say, he's incredibly disciplined. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe the most disciplined human ever with food.
Yeah.
Or certainly in the social media space.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? One of my favorite, sorry, totally unrelated, but one of my, just to throw it out there on podcast, have you guys followed, they're nutritionists. It's that couple, the two girls, Alex Parker and.
Oh yeah, and nope, I can. Meredith, isn't it? In her name, Meredith Root. Yeah.
Yes, dude. Their social, their health, or what is it? Not health. Their nutrition program that they run and all their stuff they put out. That's super dry humor, really to the point. Like that's a suggested follow for anyone out there. I think it's good, basic,
they're great,
blunt stuff. So if anyone's out there, I love that things.
That's the same reason I love Lane Norton, because he doesn't give a fuck about your feelings, and he's just like, nope, this is what the data says.
Yeah.
Fuck you and your keto program.
Which one's Lane Norton?
His handle is BioLane.
BioLane.
Okay. It's really broad shoulders, dark hair. It's like half of his Instagram stories are him powerlifting ridiculous weight.
Well, yeah, because he was like a national champion powerlifter, like competed at Worlds.
He's still competing.
Worlds. He's competing now, like in masters categories. Absolutely. He's but like just no nonsense stuff. He's like, hey guys, you want to get stronger? Lift heavy shit. Add some weight to the bar every so often.
Did his PhD on muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah, like super smart dude.
Yeah.
And so he's real smart. He stays updated on the literature, and he literally like he'll see something on Instagram and then he'll like call them out, be like, they said this, it's fucking wrong. Like the literature doesn't support that. Like, don't do this. They're fucking stupid. And then just kind of just leave it at that. And it's amazing because he's like, he doesn't have like a specific bias. So he's like, do whatever you want to do. Like nutrition's his kind of specialty. He's like, do whatever you want to do that makes you happy. Mm-hmm. If doing this makes you happy, fantastic. Don't tell other people it's better than other stuff, because that's fucking stupid. So like, do what makes you happy. Great. Don't put that on other people.
Yeah.
So, he's a great follow for nutrition as well. I get a kick out of some of his posts, and he's like, he gets on rants and makes fun of people and roasts them and be like, this is actually wrong.
I'll have to check him out.
It's incredible. You'd appreciate it, Pat. You'd appreciate it.
Good.
I think that, first of all, I love stuff like this. I mean, going down rabbit holes like this it's frankly, I think I'm speaking for Kevin. Like, this is why we do this. This is totally scratching a professional itch. If you were going to grab a handful of individuals, Pat, and like shake them by the shoulders and say, stop doing this, do this instead. Because we've, going back to, Galpin and this thing of muscle hypertrophy, like, how do we, and we as coaches, we can do this at the individual level, the people inside of our affiliates, and we should. I think we absolutely should. I also think that there is a room for more discussions, a level up from that, where it's coaches amongst coaches, and then maybe a level up from that where there's, people who are creating conversations that are going to trickle down into affect, hopefully, thousands of people at a time. What have you found to be effective, or have you found anything to be effective in terms of changing the dialogue?
I don't know. I think I don't know if I have the platform to actually change the dialogue. I try to put stuff out, but I tend to, especially the way social media works is you speak to your audience, right?
Yes.
So like you when you put stuff out that people don't agree with, oftentimes they don't like, there's not a like big acceptance on the other side. They're like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Like, it's more like people who are into it, and people who are not, they just ignore it. So in terms of changing the dialogue, I think the only thing that we can do is continue to speak with greater clarity, and continue to make comparisons in ways that make sense, like talking like very openly about the difference between, and not like necessarily demonizing the idea of bodybuilding, but just saying like,
Sure.
hey, they're just clearly not training for function. They're just training to what they look like. And I haven't seen any tangible change though. And that's probably my biggest problem with the industry at the moment is there's no, even all the self-help shit that's out there, all the stuff you see on social, people don't actually do it. There's a lot of conversation, but there's no action. There's so much motion. There's so much that even the Andrew Hubermans of this world and the Galpins of this world and the
motion and action,
the motion, and it's the difference between motion and action. And you look at it and like, it's all motion. All of the consumption is just motion. There's nobody doing. And that's why I love CrossFit gyms, because CrossFit gyms are doing. You get a group of people doing, and if they don't do, nothing happens. And when they do, like life changes, right?
Yeah.
So like, I think the only thing we can do in terms of changing the dialogue is the individual interactions that we have on a daily basis. Like that's the only actual change we can make, other than hopefully, continue maybe giving a little bit of inspiration that someone's like, fine, I'll go try this gym or whatever it is on social spaces. Like I get the rare message that's like, dude, I really appreciate your authenticity. And I'm like, great. Like maybe that caused you to take some action. Like I hope it did.
Right.
Or maybe speaking to my audience and saying, you need to be better, like speaking to my coaches or the people who follow what I do. And they're like, okay, well, I'm going to go out and try to be better. I'm going to go out. Maybe this podcast goes out and someone reframes in their head how they run their ab thing at the end of their session, where they build context around it and they no longer just say, we're doing it to get shredded, and they build some context and that group of people has a better perceptive moving forward. But in terms of tangible action and tangible change, I can't tell you how to move the narrative. I don't know. I don't know. I wish I did.
What a powerful phrase. I don't know.
Yeah. Because if we had the answer of how to change the narrative, it would have been changed decades ago. Like it would have just been. It wouldn't even be a conversation. Like we wouldn't be having this conversation on this podcast right now if we had the ability to, like any one of us, to just go and change the narrative.
Right.
So once someone figures out how to get like a megaphone big enough that the entire world can hear you,
right?
Till then.
Well, we tried fascism. That didn't work. So
did it not? I thought every time it's been used, it's worked.
Yeah. That's the argument that's made, or no, that it's never been done the right way.
We can always try again. We can always try again.
I think it'll have to
try again. See what I like
this time.
I think statistically speaking, we'll end up running out of people. Let's not do that.
Nah, we're good. We're good.
Oh, Jesus. Well, first of all,
it only needs to work one time.
Keep trying.
Just keep going. It's like eventually.
The sunk cost fallacy doesn't apply to fascism. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come talk to us about this. And hopefully, to to your point about, you're going to do something at the end of class, put some context around it. Maybe also do a static hollow hold for time instead of just, crush and flutter kicks. Like, and, there's reasons why you can do a bunch of things, but these little things that we say, we're going to do flutter kicks or we're going to get shredded. It plants the seed in someone's mind that perpetuates the idea, incorrectly so, that I do X, it leads to Y and or Z, right? Whereas just by changing how we approach something or talk about something, we can begin to shift people's perception, shift people's understanding of something radically, even though we might not be giving people what they want, so to speak. But as we so often know, what people want and what they need is not in alignment, maybe. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your mind, and I appreciate you taking time to come and try to unpack something like this that we know needs to be talked about, and hopefully we can get a couple people, to pay attention to it.
Yeah, and then those people can go out and talk to more people and further
Yes.
and further. Hopefully, we can head that direction.
Fingers crossed. Kevin, before we kick everybody loose, final thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?
No, I thought like it was a great conversation. I was a little disappointed I didn't get to argue with Pat because he changed his descriptor of like what he thought about. I was so ready to be like, no, it's okay for like, because in my mind I was like, if what motivates you to get going is like, hey, I want to look better, and that motivates you to get going, at least gets your foot in the door of fitness, then like I'm all for it. But then Pat went and was like, no, I just don't see it aesthetics as a long-term pursuit. I was like, fuck. Like he's like that little descriptor right there took all my arguments out the window. I'm like, I can't argue with it.
Bullets out of the gun.
But yeah, pretty much. But it was a great discussion. Hopefully we get to have more of them. I think we, did a great job of this one. What's the next topic, Pat, for the third time we have you on the show?
Ooh,
what's the little teaser? What's the little teaser?
I mean, I dove into it a little bit already, but I don't think there's any true value in social media at the moment. But so like, I think it carries very little actual weight, and while simultaneously just confusing the shit out of people. So maybe
Doing
if we want to try to dive into that.
Yeah,
I think the amount of harm versus the amount of good is just scales are so tipped, but we can dig into that if you want next time.
That could be a great podcast episode. Maybe like not 100% fitness related, but like how social media can impact your health for sure.
Oh yeah,
in multiple different ways.
If it's impacting your health, it's fitness related.
Okay. Listen, you guys, it's with your smart words. I meant like you're not physically. Well, maybe you're working out while you're on.
See what I mean?
Like,
you're talking yourself in circles already.
Jesus. I'm just not going to say words anymore. I'm just going to.
That's okay. Pat, final questions, thoughts, comments, concerns?
I'm just proud to be between you two guys in hair growth. So I'm glad we have all different levels represented here of the buzzed head. So thank you for having me. This is fun. I really appreciate kind of going back and forth with two people who think about what they say. It ends up being pretty fun. I think more people need to continue to have conviction with what they believe, even regardless of whether or not they're correct or not, but just be open to having the conversation. And I think especially within this space, like we can differ and we tend to agree, but we can differ on exactly what's going on, but have a good conversation. So I think I really appreciate the ability to bounce that off and throw something out there and be like, I don't know, where does this fit? And like have it, have a genuine conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anytime, for real. All right. So anyone, if you've been following along, thank you for doing so. Coaches, if you're listening, be thoughtful, be deliberate, provide context for why you're doing things, and don't just say things. Pay attention to what falls out of your mouth hole. And everybody else, go forth, be awesome. We'll see you on the flip side, everybody.
And remember, a pike is not a hollow.